Hello there. Welcome in to a Wednesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app is, of course, sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I would love to get your thoughts on them. You could call or text into the show at 719-247-1313. Not all the topics today are positive ones. As a pioneer of the Denver Broncos organization has passed away. We'll talk about that as we move forward. Jonas Fieldberg of the Colorado Springs Switchbacks will be my guest coming up in hour number 3, as that team has started to put things together, and of course a healthy dose of Broncos conversation. But we start with, because we can't get enough, as much as we say that we're happy that we don't have to deal with a quarterback competition in Denver, and I don't have to talk about it and you don't have to fret over it. You miss it, don't you? You miss it. It's one of the best things about training camp is when you have a quarterback competition. So let's live vicariously through the Cleveland market. Of course, there is a local interest in what is going on out there. So before the Browns practiced today, word on the streets of Cleveland was that if Kenny Pickett cannot go, or not Kenny Pickett, excuse me, there's so many I lose track. If Dylan Gabriel can't go Saturday against the Philadelphia Eagles in the second preseason game for the Browns, then Shedeur Sanders would get the start. And then Shedeur took the field, warmed up, and strained his oblique. And now he is unlikely to play on Saturday against the Philadelphia Eagles. So first, I have to say this. I do give the Browns a lot of flack for the way that they do things and why they are the way that they are. I see the vision with Snoop Huntley. Like, you're not going to play Joe Flacco. So it's like right now, Snoop Huntley might be the last man standing. He might get 4 quarters on Saturday. I don't know what the Browns are going to do at quarterback for Saturday. But as far as Shedeur goes, it is, I think it is very disappointing for Browns fans to not be able to see Shedeur follow up his debut, in which he threw for over 130 yards and a couple of touchdowns and really showed, oh yeah, all that nonsense that happened during the NFL draft, let's kind of put that to the side. That's over and done with. Now the fact of the matter is Shedeur Sanders is an NFL quarterback. And he is the only hope that the Browns have in that quarterback room for a future. So it is disappointing that Shedeur probably will not play on Saturday. But to me, this doesn't change a lot. Right? It doesn't, because if Kenny Pickett also can't, or if I keep going to Kenny Pickett, if Dylan Gabriel cannot go, and if that's really the conversation here, because Joe Flacco's the starter, and then it's just where are you going to turn after that? And I have my opinions, but I think that the way that the Browns were planning this thing out was, hey, we'll give both rookies time and we'll evaluate and go from there. Well, if Dylan Gabriel can't play on Saturday, then To me, it's status quo with the Cleveland Browns. Then there's nothing that could happen this weekend that would alter Shador's trajectory. If Dillon Gabriel were able to play and was phenomenal, then there would be more of a conversation. Now, I would still be where I've always been on this, that Shador Sanders should be the young quarterback that the Browns invest in, but at least there's a conversation to, all right, what about Dillon Gabriel? Are we so sure that Dillon Gabriel is not worth some investment? But if he can't play either, to look at it in a callous way, certainly the Browns or Shador aren't looking at it this way. But if you just look at it as a competition, Shador's not losing anything this week. He's not losing whatever standing he has because Snoop Huntley's just a body they brought in because of the injuries to Pickett and Gabriel. So really it's same in terms of this Browns quarterback competition. But the fact that Shador isn't going to be able to follow it up or further put his stamp on being the young quarterback of preference for the Cleveland Browns, yeah, that is a little disappointing. And let's also not forget what preseason is about. Shador Sanders is going to be slightly less prepared than he would have been going into the season. Now, what does that matter necessarily if Joe Flacco was going to be the starter all along? I don't know. I mean, you'd have time to make up for it, I would think. It's a missed opportunity for Shador Sanders. That is not his fault. Injuries happen. But looking at everything else with the Cleveland Browns, I don't know that it changes the outlook. And I think that the Browns were already going to play Shador the last preseason game. I think they wanted to get both young quarterbacks working all three games. I actually think that the injury to Dillon Gabriel is more consequential because if this guy can't get out on the field, if he can't play, and Kenny Pickett gets shipped off to another team, I mean, could his spot on the roster be in jeopardy? I wouldn't think so, but would they? Because that's the next question is, are the Browns going to carry three quarterbacks? Because I'm not a huge fan of Dillon Gabriel, but if they try to pass him onto the practice squad, and I'm a team that's doesn't really have a young quarterback, maybe I'd pick up Dillon Gabriel. But I think the fact that he hasn't been able to get on the field is more consequential than Shador not being able to play this weekend. But he will not be able to follow up what he did against the Carolina Panthers this weekend. Bo Nix, just because we're talking about it, healthy, all good with Bo Nix. No issues there. But speaking of, I want to do Mike Sando, who writes for The Athletic, does one of the better quarterback lists. Everybody does them. I've done mine. But this one's heavily researched, and he gets people's opinion in the NFL, which I think is also very important, very telling. You know, we have our conversations about Bo Nix or any quarterback. Well, what do people inside the NFL think? His quarterback tier list was released, and it's a tier list, but it's also the rankings. In this case, 1 through 34. Because when he pulled these people inside the National Football League, we didn't. The Browns quarterbacking situation, and I think just to see with Atlanta, we know they were going with Michael Penix, but they're not that far removed from Kirk Cousins. So there's a couple of teams that got multiple quarterbacks on this list. But where does Bo Nix rank? And see if you agree with this. And then we'll get into the Broncos 53-man roster after preseason game number 1. How much seems set with the Broncos 53? What decisions will Sean Payton still need to be made? And it obviously leads into maybe some of the players to watch this Saturday against the Arizona Cardinals. Broncos will have a joint practice with the Cardinals tomorrow, by the way. And we plan on getting an eyewitness account brought to you tomorrow, courtesy of friend of the program, Jessica Mendoza. But all that's to come. Coming up next, have your texting or calling fingers ready, 719-247-1313. Mike Sando's tier list of quarterbacks taken straight from people that evaluate talent within the NFL. What do they think about Bo Nix right here and now? Because that's what's important. Not who you'd rather have in 5 years or start your – this is right now, who are the best quarterbacks? Where does Bo Nix stack up? We'll get into that next here on Extra Sports 1300. Saturday night, Switchbacks FC back under the lights at Widener Field against Orange County SC, and there will be a little extra magic in the air because it is Witches and Wizards night. Come dressed for the occasion if that's your thing. Kickoff is at 7, seats disappearing fast, but I have 4 of them for you. 4-pack of tickets to Saturday night's match at Widener Field if you would like to go. And will not require you to dress up like a witch or wizard. That's completely your call. But if you are the 13th texter to text Switchbacks and your name to 719-247-1313, you'll get 4 tickets to Saturday night's match against Orange County SC. Tickets are available in limited quantities at switchbacksfc.com. So not all quarterback lists are equal. We enjoy all of them, right? But some, there's a little bit more work that goes into it. And I appreciate what Mike Sando does for The Athletic every year in talking with 50 NFL people in the know to get their thoughts on who the best quarterbacks are. And he puts them into tier lists. And I'll start with Bo Nix, and then we'll kind of work our way to the bigger picture here. Bo Nix is in the 3rd tier of quarterbacks, and he is in a tie for 20th with Sam Darnold. So the question is, do you think that there are 19 quarterbacks in the NFL who are better than Bo Nix? And I would say at this moment in time, yes. I think there's this misconception that because there was some sort of a rookie of the year battle between he and Jaden Daniels that they are the same. They are very different. And they are very far apart in terms of their talent level. For instance, Jaden Daniels is at the top of the 2nd tier. And Bo Nix is in the meaty part of the 3rd tier. So I think you can guess most of the quarterbacks that are in front of him. Here are some that are in his tier that NFL industry experts said were better than Bo Nix. Kyler Murray, Aaron Rodgers, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, and Geno Smith. I don't know that you could argue against many of those players at this point. And I know the last name is going to be the one that triggers because essentially these NFL industry experts are saying that Bo Nix is the worst quarterback in the AFC West. And I say that's no way to look at it. He's the 4th best. No, I like Bo Nix more than I like Geno Smith. So there's one in that tier where I'm like, I think maybe I would put Bo Nix above. But look, Geno Smith has had, as much as he was perceived to be a draft bust, this 2nd act of his career, he's kind of done more than Bo Nix did in year 1. I can certainly see the argument for Geno Smith. I would put Bo Nix above Geno Smith. I would. But I don't think I would put him above any of these guys. And easiest way to do it, would I take Trevor Lawrence or Bo Nix? I'd take Trevor Lawrence. Without hesitation. Would I take Bo Nix or Tua? Right. It would be some hesitation, but I think I would take Tua because Tua's best is pretty dang good. Now, here's the thing with Bo Nix and many of these young quarterbacks. Like, they have more potential upward mobility than these other guys. Tua's not going to go up. I'll tell you, the guys in this tier, the only one that I can see actually having upward mobility to maybe move into the next tier is Trevor Lawrence. I don't know what else Kyler Murray has to have in order for him to take the next step. I think that he can only go down. Aaron Rodgers, same thing. I think he can, at his age, he can only go down. I think I would take Aaron Rodgers over Bo Nix. But Aaron Rodgers, we've seen the best of Aaron Rodgers, certainly. We may not have seen the best of Bo Nix yet. In fact, I'll even grant that I don't think we've seen the best of Bo Nix. I just don't know that the best of Bo Nix is going to be that much higher on this list. And I said this when I did my rankings. Like Bo Nix, you could see this year a scenario, or in the next couple years, see a scenario in which he jumps Geno Smith. Let's say Liam Cohen can't save Trevor Lawrence. He could jump over Trevor Lawrence in the next couple of years. Tua, same thing. Aaron Rodgers, Kyler Murray. He could be ranked above all of these guys within the next couple of years. But I look at that next group and I don't know that I think I see very clearly Bo Nix's ceiling. Can he be a better version of Brock Purdy? I have to see him perform in a big game. I think that's the difference. I think there's some tools that Bo Nix has in his tool belt that Brock Purdy doesn't. And it's his running ability. But I said this after the San Francisco game. Like, Brock Purdy is the ghost of Bo Nix's future. Like, that's what I look at as Bo Nix. That we're going to have a similar conversation about him as we are currently having around Brock Purdy. And wondering if he didn't have elite coaching, if he didn't have a great offensive line, if he didn't have weapons, although Bo Nix doesn't really have that many weapons, if we're being honest about it. But without the help, without the scaffolding that Sean Payton and the Broncos have provided, could Bo Nix win football games? That's one of the things that we're going to find out. But you can't put Bo Nix above Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's been to a Super Bowl. I don't care if he was a game manager to a Super Bowl. He went to a Super Bowl. I think right now in Brock Purdy is at the bottom of the second tier. Now, for me, I would put him at the top of the same tier Bo Nix is in. I would say that is the most aspirational I am willing to be about Bo Nix's future, is that he could be Brock Purdy, where we go, I don't know if he's great, but with this stuff around him, like, he manages it very well. So I would put Brock Purdy in a different tier than he is currently in, and I would have Bo Nix in the same tier and kind of look at it as everyone in that tier is fighting to become the guy at the top of it. But I think this is fair. I mean, really, I would just flip-flop Bo Nix and Geno Smith, call it good. Or I guess first I would break the tie between Nicks and Darnold. And then I put Nicks above Geno Smith. I think at most that's where the highest you can put him at this point. Again, this is not a futures list. This is right in the here and now. I think it's pretty fair. Now, I look at the list as a whole, and I the same thing I said about Brock Purdy, I would say about Matthew Stafford. I am happy to see that Matthew Stafford is being placed above Jaden Daniels. Not because I'm anti-Jaden Daniels, very pro Jaden Daniels. But I think Matthew Stafford, we seem to forget him. The injury that he has right now has kind of put him in the news cycle, but it's like when Matthew Stafford, when there's no headlines about Matthew Stafford, he sometimes gets forgotten. And he's a very good quarterback. So I would have him fifth. When I ranked the quarterbacks, I had him fifth. But I would do the same thing I did with Brock Purdy and say, I don't think Stafford is the Burrow Allen. I know people are going to say, what happened in the Super Bowl? Okay, well, first of all, that was a couple years ago. And second of all, how much did Joe Burrow do to lose that game? So, a little bit of a nuanced argument. I mean, it's fine. It's like if Brock Purdy is at the bottom of the second tier or the top of the third, it's really semantics. It's just a personal preference. They're both at about the same spot in terms of their ranking where I would expect them to be. But in terms of the tier, I'd probably move Matthew Stafford down and say, you're the fifth best quarterback, but you're the top of the next tier of QB. Same with Brock Purdy. You're not at the bottom of the second tier. You're at the top of the third tier. But two other things that stuck out to me. One, they have Burrow tied with Mahomes. I do not agree. I do not agree that Patrick Mahomes, I think Patrick Mahomes is number one with a bullet. If you want to put Joe Burrow 2, I might even argue with you. Because I do think it's Mahomes 1, and then it's Lamar and Josh Allen, depending on what you think. I'll hear arguments on both sides of the equation. I'll give Josh Allen, with the performance he put in last year, with less around him than Lamar Jackson had, I'll give Josh Allen the nod for 2. Put Lamar 3, but I could hear arguments to reverse that and put Lamar 2 and Josh Allen 3, and I put Burrow 4. And I mean, we're really, splitting the atom here because this is not to disparage Joe Burrow at all. But I would take Lamar. And the easiest way to do this, right, is if you need to win a football game tomorrow, who you taking? And maybe some people would say Joe Burrow. Are you taking Joe Burrow and the Bengals to win a football game tomorrow? That might change it a little bit. So that's how I have it. But those are the 4. And then I would have Matthew Stafford 5. Here's the other thing. And when I ranked my quarterbacks, I did this. I think Jared Goff's got to be lower. I think Jared Goff is an older version of Brock Purdy. Like, if you gave me one quarterback, like the guys that I would take Stroud above Goff. I would take Hurts above Goff. And I'd take Baker Mayfield above Jared Goff. So Jared Goff is really the guy that I'm seeing pop up on all of these lists where I'm like, he's got to move down. These other guys, maybe a spot, maybe a couple of spots. But Jared Goff's the guy, I got to move him down. And of course, Jalen Hurts is going to draw a lot of. I don't think that he's incredibly misranked. Being essentially a top 10 quarterback. I would just move Goff out of the top 10 and put Mayfield in there. And then I think you would have it. But the rest of that second tier, in case you were thinking that Bo Nix should be in that second tier, it's Jaden Daniels, Herbert, Goff, Stroud, Hurts, Mayfield, Prescott, Love, Purdy. I don't think Bo Nix is in that group right now. But in case you think I'm being only negative, I certainly don't think Bo Nix deserves to be in the tier with Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Daniel Jones, Joe Flacco, Anthony Richardson, and Spencer Rattler. That's the fourth tier. And then poor Kenny Pickett is in his own tier, ranked the worst quarterback of 34. Maybe not the worst quarterback in the league. But Mike Sando asked these people, Flacco and Pickett, because at that time you didn't know who was going to be the guy, and eventually it will be neither. It will be Shedeur Sanders. But Bo Nix tied for 20th, fourth-ranked quarterback in the AFC West, third tier, tied with Sam Darnold, but better than his predecessor in Denver, which I think is fair. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the Broncos today have mourned the passing of a pioneer in their franchise's history. Congratulations to Brian, who won the tickets to Saturday's Switchbacks match. Be looking out for those, Brian, here shortly. Mike Sando putting together his quarterback tier list, polling 50 NFL industry insiders. Some of the things that stuck out, I think probably the thing that, unless it's your favorite quarterback, I think the thing that sticks out is that these people had Burrow and Mahomes tied for first. And I think there's a couple of different ways where it's surprising. One is that somebody was tied with Mahomes. And two, that it was Burrow and not Lamar or Josh Allen. I think some people will be surprised at either one of those two things. I'm surprised that Burrow is tied with Mahomes. Like, that's the guy. I mean, certainly we've seen when they've gone head-to-head, Burrow, unlike Lamar, unlike Josh Allen, actually can say that he's gotten the better of Patrick Mahomes, but the greater body of work is heavily in Patrick Mahomes' favor. This text coming in from the 719 says, Chat GPT disagrees with you. Well, how dare Chat GPT? Said Burrow individually is better. This is from Corey. Burrow individually is better than the other two in the rankings. Are QB rankings, not team and QB rankings. Yeah, what I was just saying is, an easy way to kind of boil this down is to say, if you need to win a game tomorrow, who are you calling on? And it's sometimes hard for people to say, I'm going to call on Burrow because you think you get the Bengals with it. And that's a little bit of the fault of an argument like that, right? Because you're saying, well, okay, is Joe Burrow playing for the Kansas City Chiefs? Then yeah, okay. But how about turning it the other way? What would Mahomes do if he had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? I think what you can say about Joe Burrow is that the Cincinnati Bengals need to figure this crap out. Like, Joe Burrow has some Dan Marino vibes, right? Like, I think the perception about Dan Marino was that the Dolphins couldn't figure it out, despite having one of the most talented, gifted quarterbacks in the history of football. They just could never figure it out. I don't know that Dan Marino had a long list of failures. For instance, Jim Kelly losing in the Super Bowl and some of these other guys. Joe Burrow's got a little bit of that. Like, gosh, if you just took this guy and moved him, put him on a different team. I think there's that with Joe Burrow where you're like, I think it's there. But again, Mahomes, think about what Mahomes has done. We talk about, the team and how that influences these things. Well, put Patrick Mahomes in that, like Patrick Mahomes with a lesser group of playmakers around him than Joe Burrow has. And if he had the supporting cast on the offensive side of the football that Joe Burrow has, like Mahomes' numbers would be good. So the argument cuts both ways. But Joe Burrow is phenomenally talented, and the Bengals either need to figure it out or he needs to go to a different team. And this list is even more of a reason. Like, if Joe Burrow is on the same level as the greatest quarterback, inarguably, since Tom Brady, and that's the only guy throughout NFL history he might be chasing at this point. If Joe Burrow's as good as that guy, then his organization needs to figure it out. But I would say Mahomes is by himself. I don't do the thing where Mahomes is in a tier all by himself, but I put Mahomes at the top. I wouldn't put any other quarterback tied with him. And I would put Allen and Lamar above Burrow, but Burrow's in that tier. I'm okay with that. And then I think that you put a dividing line and say next tier, Matthew Stafford at the top of it. And then to compensate, you cut off the next tier right before Brock Purdy and say, Brock Purdy, you're the top quarterback in that third tier that Bo Nix is in. That's probably how I would do it. Continue to take your thoughts, 719-24-7, 1313. So in my opinion, Burrow and Mahomes are not equal. But my bigger platform, we got Jared Goff ranked too high. And I think there are going to be more people coming over to my side this year with him not having Ben Johnson. Now, he's not a bad quarterback. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying there are other quarterbacks, and I keep going back to Baker Mayfield. That's the example for me. Like Baker Mayfield, I would, in that hypothetical, you need to win. I'll take Baker. Baker gives me a little bit something else. Not saying Baker can do it all by himself. This is not the tier that these are quarterbacks that can do it all by themselves. That's the top tier. The guys that are perceived to be able to do it with basically any cast of characters around them. That's not this group. So Baker Mayfield needs help. He does have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And last year he had a very good running game with Bucky Irving. But Baker brings a little bit of that. It's just such a hokey term, but that moxie. That I would take him over Jared Goff. They both need help. More help than Burrow, Allen, Lamar, and that group. But that's my bigger thing. I think Jared Goff's too high, and I think he's going to fall down that tier. He won't be out of the tier that he's in, but he'll fall down it this time next year, I think. Continue to take your thoughts on that, 719-24-7-1313. Sad news today out of Denver, as just shy, 2 days. In 2 days, Lionel Taylor was going to celebrate his 90th birthday. And the Broncos Ring of Famer, one of the best wide receivers to ever play for the Denver Broncos, passed away this afternoon at the age of 89. Again, just 2 days shy of his 90th birthday. I can't sit here and pretend that I watched Lionel Taylor play because I didn't. But his resume is impressive. And you wonder, sometimes you look up at the Broncos Ring of Fame, and especially with these older Broncos players, you're like, okay, what did this guy do? Well, Lionel Taylor did a lot. He was the first player in pro football history to catch 100 balls in a year. He retired as the Broncos' career leader in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. He averaged about 103 receiving yards per game one season, and he was incredibly consistent as a member of the Denver Broncos. Led the AFL in receptions 5 times, first team All-AFL 4 times, Colorado Sports Hall of Famer and a Denver Broncos Ring of Famer. Really what he was the first star that the Broncos had at that position. Now others have come along and they will be immortalizing one of them this year in the Ring of Fame, Demaryius Thomas, Rod Smith, Ed McCaffrey. You may be able to argue that any of those 3 guys were better than Lionel Taylor, but Taylor deserves to be in that conversation, and he was the first. And I didn't know this about Lionel Taylor. He's a linebacker. He's a linebacker converted to wide receiver. How often do we hear that turn? Lionel Taylor, linebacker to wide receiver. But a Broncos legend, absolutely. And, you know, the unfortunate thing is it takes something like this sometimes for us to talk about someone like that. And it's not because we want to not talk about those guys. It's just time has passed and we're living in the now and moving forward and looking to the future. But, yeah, and I had to read up quite a bit on Lionel Taylor. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I am an encyclopedia of Lionel Taylor knowledge, but knew some of what I said I knew, some of it researched, and certainly upon further research, an even more impressive resume than I had thought he had from what I was told by my dad and what I had heard or read from the Broncos. So a Broncos legend passing away at the age of 89, Lionel Taylor. Broncos Ring of Famer, Colorado Sports Hall of Famer. If you did have a chance to watch Lionel Taylor play, or you have more of an encyclopedic knowledge of him than I do, I would love to hear from you. 719-247-1313. But the Broncos family certainly mourning that loss this afternoon, and that was announced not that long ago, hour or two ago. 719-247-1313. We'll continue with Drive Time Sports in a few. Up first, here's Dan Patrick's Above the Noise commentary on Extra Sports 1300. This is Above the Welcome in hour 2 on this Wednesday. Glad to have you. Sent the boys back to school today. It's good, though. It's not like they were doing, just like when I was their age, it's not like I was doing anything important during the summer. They can go back to school, but happy back to school for all you parents out there. 719-247-1313 is the number if you'd like to share your thoughts. Got some conversation going in the first hour, mainly regarding the quarterback tier list that Mike Sando of The Athletic put out. Brock. See, I'm already doing it. Told you, Bo Nix. One day when he grows up will be Brock Purdy. Bo Nix tied with Sam Darnold for the 20th best quarterback in the league, including according to 50 NFL industry experts, one spot behind bitter rival Geno Smith. And what I heard pushed him over the top, the fact that Geno Smith is willing to flip off football fans. Like, that's really what broke. It was a 3-way tie. And then one of the NFL industry experts was like, wait a minute. Geno Smith flipped off some fans. He goes a notch above Bo Nix and Sam Darnold, who would never. They would never do that. I like my quarterbacks to flip off fans if warranted. And I got to say, considering some of the behavior from athletes towards fans and how interactive they have gotten in the past, I actually have no issue with it, and I'm sure that Geno Smith made that fans' day. You don't write a sign, who's a bigger bust, Geno Smith or Jamarcus Russell, sitting right by the Raiders tunnel. Your goal is to get a reaction, not a Ron Artest reaction. But you're trying to get, I'm sure that dude was absolutely thrilled. And he has a great story. I'm 100% with Pete Carroll. Good with it. I have no problem with what Geno Smith did. Now, I would still put Bo Nix above him in the quarterback rankings, but Geno Smith did endear himself to a lot of people, including Raider fans. Between Max Crosby looking like a Raider and Geno Smith acting like one, the Raiders are on their way back, slowly but surely. Broncos getting ready for their second preseason game. And I cobbled together a 53-man roster today. And this was kind of the impetus of this was Sean Payton yesterday talking about the good problems that he has when it comes to depth.
How do we keep trying to give these guys opportunities where it gives us more of an exposure? We're not even halfway. And I mean that. We're not halfway. And, I want to get Evan a few touches in the game. How do I get Bryant a few, receptions in the game? How do I handle the running back rotation this week different than last week? The same way with us on defense at certain positions. Those are all things that we discuss during the week and try to manufacture.
And I think in this game, you'll see a little bit of it. I think certainly in the third preseason game, you'll see a lot of this. Sean Payton trying to give some of the guys perhaps on the roster bubble some opportunity and try to figure out some of these positions where there are a lot of choices. As I was mapping it out, I had 36 players who I'm like, they're on. No doubt about it. They're in. I had 36. That leaves 17 spots that are up for grabs. But the problem is, for some people, that it's not just the 17 next best players. There's a practical part of putting together a 53-man roster that you're going to want reinforcements if you suffer an injury. You want depth. So it's not just going to be the next 17 best guys that get on the Broncos roster. And the way it's looking, there will be a player or two that when cuts start happening, you go, whoa, that guy got cut. And that, again, is a credit to George Payton for drafting as well as he has, and he and Sean Payton working in concert to create the depth that this Broncos team currently has. So, for instance, I got 36 players that have locked up a spot, but I have like every other spot accounted for. The only two running backs that I said were a cinch to make the roster were J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey. And that picture has become a little bit more blurry as we have gone along. But there are going to be at least two running backs, right? There's going to be two. And then there's going to be two defensive linemen because I had Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, DJ Jones, and Malcolm Roach absolutely making the roster. They're going to take two more defensive linemen. They're going to take two inside linebackers other than Greenlaw and Singleton. They're going to take two more outside linebackers in addition to Cooper, Ellis, and Benito. Two more corners outside of Surtain, Moss, Jahdae Barron, and I put Jaquan McMillan as a lock to make the roster. Veteran, he's done the job before. Yes, Jahdae Barron is kind of taking his job, but McMillan's going to make the roster. They'll probably take two more corners, and I don't think anything is set behind Hufanga and Jones, but there will probably be two more safeties. And that's pretty much that accounts for all 53. So I think going into preseason game number 2, this is kind of what I'm looking at in terms of the 53-man roster. One is, will Drew Sanders be ready for the season? I could imagine the Broncos putting him on the injured list to be able to open up another spot for another player. But if Drew Sanders makes his way back from injury any earlier, then perhaps they just give him that spot on the roster. But I think they'll probably put Sanders on the injured list just for the initial 53 to get another guy on there, let everyone else set their 53-man roster, and then maybe make a move a little bit later. But a couple of the other questions I have. Are they going to keep Nate Atkins and Michael Burton? Are they going to essentially keep two fullbacks on the roster? Because Nate Atkins can play tight end and fullback. Is Michael Burton so indispensable that you can't just see Nate Atkins playing the fullback position? Because if you have a guy that you can use at multiple spots, then maybe you can protect the depth you have at more important positions like, say, the offensive line. Maybe you keep one more skill position player. So are the Broncos going to keep Nate Atkins and Michael Burton on the roster? And then after that question gets answered, what about Lance Kroll, who Sean Payton spoke very highly of? I mean, you want to talk about some of these running backs getting forced down the depth chart? How about with the addition of Evan Ingram, how quickly things have turned when it comes to Kroll? Then you go at safety, Devin Key. I've seen other roster projections have him. With the importance that the Denver Broncos have put on special teams, do you really want to cut J.L. Skinner? If he could play safety in a backup capacity, and you saw him the play he made against the San Francisco 49ers. You need sure tacklers on your special teams unit. In the way that Sean Payton has emphasized special teams, I'm like, I don't know that they want to lose J.L. Skinner. So that'll be interesting. Are you going to do 6 or 7 linemen? You're going to take 6 or you're going to take 7? Because right now you have the 5 starters. I think the Alexes, both Palczewski and Forsyth, are going to be on the roster. Then how many after that? And that goes into the fullback tight end discussion. If you take Nate Atkins and say, you're our fullback, but also if we need you in a pinch, you'll be a tight end. Now it allows you to maybe use that open roster spot if you like your offensive lineman. And we're talking Calvin Throckmorton. We're talking about Matt Pert, maybe Frank Crum. Shouts to the Wyoming Cowboys. And then I'll go back to I'm on this like special teams kick. I liked he was shook on one of the punt returns against the 49ers on Saturday, but Garrett Nelson, I thought, overall performed very well on special teams. I haven't seen a lot of DeAndre Tillman. Do you choose to take essentially the more talented pass rusher or a guy that you know has been a proven special teams performer? But between all of those things I just listed, it's really one roster spot. It's a 7th lineman. It's J.L. Skinner. It's, Michael Burton, or it's Lance Kroll, or it's Garrett Nelson. Like all of these guys. And don't forget my guy, Joaquin Davis. Sticking with him. He had 1 catch. Maybe I'm being a little Al Davis-like and falling in love with the 40 time here, but I think he's going to be in that conversation too. The problem is wide receiver room quite crowded, especially after Sherfield showed out the way he did. And, the Broncos brought him in for special teams. But I think all of those questions that I have lead into only one of the guys I mentioned is going to get a spot. Now, the Broncos do this every year. They could, like I mentioned with Drew Sanders, they could do something a little bit strategic in terms of placing somebody on the injured list to open up another roster spot. We could see them do that. We know what happens in football. Chances are another Bronco will get hurt because that's just life in the NFL. And they could do some strategic things too to keep some of these guys. But there are some difficult decisions. But I think the most difficult one will be, what are the Broncos going to do at running back? And if I projected the 53, which I did, I don't think anyone outside of Harvey or Dobbins are locked. But as I was sketching it out, I had Audric Estime on the outside looking in. Subject to change, but I had him off the roster. But then I did have Jaleel McLaughlin on it over Blake Watson, with Tyler Bidet being in there. Because when Sean Payton talks about Tyler Bidet's blocking ability in the pass game, that makes my ears perk up. I'm like, that's the way you get on Sean Payton's roster as a running back. And if Bidet can do that, and I know Dobbins can do it too. But that going into Saturday is the most fascinating preseason storyline to watch. Obviously, we'll be looking to see if the first teamers have a little bit better of a showing than they did against San Francisco. But in terms of what has to be decided in the preseason, That running back room is number one. How is Sean Payton going to change up the rotation? I do think we see Audric Estime earlier than the third quarter. But I just wonder what skill set he brings that one of these other guys don't. With RJ Harvey, it's the receiving ability. With Jaleel McLaughlin and Blake Watson, it's the speed that they have. Bidet, it's the blocking. Dobbins with the blocking, but also being a veteran and being probably the running back that Sean Payton would have the most faith in. And I'm just trying to figure out what Audric Estime brings to the table. And Sean Payton doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that is afraid to, in some ways, admit a mistake. And maybe he wouldn't even phrase it that way. It would just be like, hey, we did so good and we're able to find so many other running backs that a guy we liked coming out of Notre Dame is just surplus to requirements. So it doesn't even have to be looked at necessarily as the Broncos whiffed with Audric Estime. But Sean Payton doesn't strike me as the sentimental type that would be like, well, I just drafted this guy. No, if one of these other running backs give him something that he's looking for, and we know Sean Payton is all about a certain skill set. I don't know how Audric Estime separates himself. I think ultimately with Audric Estime, it's just you got to be more productive than you were on Saturday. Again, I think he'll get a better shot in preseason game number 2. I think we'll see him earlier. But the guy did get the most carries of anybody in the running back room and was the least productive. So right now, I think with Audric Estime, his ticket onto the 53 is just straight out production. If he runs the ball extremely well, then he can make this 53. But I don't see a particular skill set where I say, well, Sean Payton's got to have a guy that does that. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. Elsewhere in the National Football League, the Buffalo Bills have inked an extension with James Cook. It's 4 years and $48 million. Interesting part about James Cook is that he is not a high volume back and is still getting paid like other running backs who do carry more of the load for their team on a week-to-week basis. But look, you are a team in the Buffalo Bills that is championship or bust. James Cook helps your team potentially win that championship. These are the kind of deals you just sign and you deal with the fallout at a later date. Not a lot of planning for the future here going on with the Buffalo Bills. It is about the now. As far as the Bills go, like, I don't know what else has to happen for them to break through. I don't know how many more rules in the NFL can get changed based on how the Bills are losing games in the playoffs. Like, NFL can't proactively look around the corner and say, how are the Buffalo Bills going to come out on the short end of the stick on a rule and change it preemptively so it doesn't cost them in a playoff game. They're doing a great job of retroactively changing all of this stuff. Change the overtime rules. Now there's a computer measuring first downs. For all the power that the NFL wields, they do not have the power to see the future. So they can't figure out what is this one rule that is going to come up because the Buffalo Bills, it cost the Buffalo Bills a chance to win a Super Bowl, and we got to change it. I don't know what has to happen. I think you look at last year, and Josh Allen deserved the MVP, but part of the reason he deserved the MVP over Lamar was because he did more with less. Does he have more this year? Are the Bills a demonstrably better team than they were a year ago? I don't think that they are. So if the whole premise of Josh Allen winning an MVP is he did more with less, how much more can he do with that less? I mean, the Buffalo Bills are certainly on the short list of teams that you can envision winning a Super Bowl, but I go back to 2 years ago, and Buffalo had a Chiefs team that was perceived to be lesser than what they had been. They had them at home, and they lost. I feel like that was the year that was separating Josh Allen from being John Elway. And my gut is just telling me that we're going to be hanging on till close to the end with Josh Allen to finally see him break through and win a Super Bowl. I mean, they're certainly on the list. They have the clearest path to win their division of anybody in the NFL. They're going to roll in the AFC East. And if they do that, which they should, the road to the Super Bowl should go through Buffalo. It should, and it needs to. I don't know if that will be enough, but I know Buffalo traveling to Arrowhead or to Baltimore could be problematic. They got to get, I think they'll get home field. They got to get home field. And I guess that will be, we'll see. But it gets to a point where you are done with your bites at the apple until big changes happen. Right? Somebody changes teams or you land a generational player at a position. Unless something significantly changes with the landscape in the National Football League, I feel like Buffalo has had their chances. So I don't think I will be picking the Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl this year. They're certainly one of the teams I could see winning, but I don't know that I'm going to back them. And to tie it to the James Cook extension, they still got to have Josh Allen running the football. Because James Cook, you found a nice sweet spot with how much you use him, and he's incredibly productive. I don't know that you want to push that. As much as I think the Bills would like to take some of the burden off of Josh Allen, I don't think they can afford to. Maybe a couple years ago, maybe, but not now. You need him more than ever. Road to the Super Bowl in the AFC's got to go through Buffalo. If they don't have that, then I'm definitely out on the Bills winning the Super Bowl. To wit, I was having this conversation with somebody earlier. How many teams can you legitimately see winning a Super Bowl? Not going to, because, and that's an important distinction, because I think the NFC is going to be kind of wild this year. And if you ask me how many teams could I see playing in the Super Bowl versus winning it, I'll tell you the difference between those two lists. It's the NFC. But I think it's Baltimore, KC, Buffalo in the AFC. Cincinnati, I like to have a bounce back year. I think they'll be a playoff team, but when they went to the Super Bowl, their defense was ranked 17th. You've seen that defense last year, and you know everything going on. Do you think they can even get to the 17th best defense in the NFL this year? And it goes back to the conversation we had earlier. Like, it would be so amazing to see Joe Burrow in a myriad of different uniforms than a Bengals one. Because there would be a myriad of teams. Think about Joe Burrow on the Denver Broncos. I don't know that the Bengals can even get up to the 17th in the NFL in defense. I really can't see Cincinnati winning a Super Bowl. And even though Buffalo's not my pick, I would put them on that list. I would put Baltimore and put Kansas City. In the NFC, if you ask me the number of teams that are capable of going to the Super Bowl, I think it would be the Rams. I think it would be the Bucks. I think it would be the Packers, Philly. I could see Washington coming out. It's just, I don't believe that the NFC have these heavyweights. And I think depending on who has home field and an injury or two to one team or another, it could greatly change that picture. But to going to a Super Bowl and winning a Super Bowl, are two different things. And I think you have the three teams in the AFC, and I think there are four in the NFC. Rams, Packers, Eagles, and the longest shot I am willing to take on a Super Bowl winning team is Tampa. But gosh, do I think Tampa can win a Super Bowl? Can they represent the NFC? Absolutely. Can they win the Super Bowl? It might be just 6. I might have to cut it off right before the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I've been going back and forth on this, but LA, I think, can not only represent the NFC, I think they can beat whatever comes out of the AFC. I think the Packers, I think they have that ability. And I think the Eagles are without question. I mean, that's the one where there's no debate. Of course, the Eagles. We've seen it. I think that's the list. 3 in the AFC, probably 3 in the NFC. Sorry, Bucks. I like your team a lot. I do, but going up against Mahomes, Allen, or Lamar, I know we saw it with the Bucks. I get it. Different time, some different personnel. Check with me tomorrow. I might be back on Tampa. But I really like Tampa. I do. And I could see them representing the NFC absolutely in the Super Bowl. I just don't know that I could foresee Tampa Bay taking down one of those 3 AFC teams. Take your thoughts. How many teams can you legitimately see winning a Super Bowl? 719-24-7. 1313 is the number. We'll be back after this. How many teams can you see winning the Super Bowl this year? And would the Broncos be on that list? 719-247-1313. Jeff thinks that I'm overvaluing the Green Bay Packers. In fact, I'm way overvaluing Green Bay. I'm overpaying, are his words for Green Bay. They are 9-8 tops. I will concede that I have been burned before by the Green Bay Packers. They are one of the teams that I tend to think very highly of. And I have been burned by them before. But I am not over. I disagree with you on the record thing. I think if you look at last year, okay, so they win 11 games. 2 of them were won with Malik Willis at quarterback, which does speak to how good the rest of the Packers team is. They're one of the best defenses in the league last year in terms of not giving up points. And you look at their losses, they were all in division. Except they lost to the Eagles, coincidentally, twice. They lost to Philly to start the season and to end the season, which there's no shame in losing to Philadelphia. They did go on to win the Super Bowl, as you recall. But everybody else they lost to was in division. And I'm telling you, Minnesota now has J.J. McCarthy, and Detroit lost both of their coordinators. I don't think I am overhyping, overpaying, over anything Green Bay in the NFC North. I am very confident in Green Bay's chances in their division. But in terms of them being a Super Bowl winning team, I admittedly have been burned before by the Green Bay Packers. Now, it's not to say that Jordan Love doesn't have some proving of himself to do, but don't forget, and I would also just randomly throw in Trevor Lawrence into these conversations because I do think we look at the totality of the season and say, oh, this was a down year, this was a bad year. Both of those quarterbacks lost time because of injury. Right? We thought Jordan Love was like done after that first game against Philadelphia. Still missed some time, was able to come back, though. He missed time because of injury. Trevor Lawrence missed a lot of time last year because of injury. Just something, I'm not saying it has to completely change your worldview of those two guys, but it is something you need to add to the equation, I think. But yeah, Jordan Love has to prove me right. But the Packers are a well-rounded team, and they were really young. They're still pretty young. But they're young players. This is about the time where they really start to hit. So we'll see. Maybe I get burned by the Packers one more time, and I don't know that I'm picking them to win the Super Bowl. I can foresee them winning the Super Bowl. But in the division, I'm not overhyping Green Bay. Green Bay's win that division. Brett says, Dan Jordan Love have toe surgery today. Thumb or toe? Was his toe or thumb? He's good. The prognosis is good. He'll start the season. That was the report that I got. Well, is his toe or his thumb? Either way, the prognosis yesterday was that he was going to be ready for the regular season. It is thumb. It's thumb, but he's going to play. He'll be good. He'll be good to go. This text coming in from the 719. Ryan, would you bet $1,000 on the Broncos to win $100,000 when they win this in the Super Bowl if you're in Vegas right now? Would I bet $1,000 on the Broncos to win the Super Bowl? Absolutely not. I wouldn't put $5 on the Broncos to win the Super Bowl. No, I don't. The most optimistic I could be about the Denver Broncos is with the injury to Rashawn Slater. I can see the possibility that they finish second in the AFC West, which should be good enough to make the playoffs. That's the most optimistic I could be. I would not put any money, nor have I put any money on the Denver Broncos. Nope. Better question to ask me next year. Because that will be the year that will be judgment year for Bo Nix. Is he the guy or not? But no, this year, not putting any money. Maybe that would be more fun. Which teams can you not even in your wildest dreams or nightmares envision winning a Super Bowl this year? Broncos might be on that list. Maybe that's a bit harsh. But yeah, no, I can't. I would not put any of my money up on the, like I said, Tampa. Tampa is the longest shot for the Super Bowl that I've allowed myself to ponder the possibility. Although Green Bay might be, now that I'm thinking about it. One of the two Bay teams might be. But Philadelphia is the favorite. I think Buffalo or Baltimore are two. I need to look up the Super Bowl odds. That's a good question, though. What would be the longest bet that you'd be willing to make? Let's do that. Great choice. Great suggestion. The longest shot that you would be willing to bet. And not bet like, hey, I'm gonna throw a buck on a Saints Titans Super Bowl because if I hit, I'm gonna be rich. Like enough, like what's that? Was it Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods? That Dan Patrick had that great line that they said he put it in his book. I think it was Michael Jordan, although Tiger Woods, it could have been him. But one of the two, when they asked how much they're willing to bet, whatever makes you nervous, think about whatever amount of money would make you a little nervous. I don't want you to, deny your kids a chance to go to college or lose your house, but just like enough money that you would miss it. What would be the longest shot? Here, I'll go down the list and you can tell me, or you could tell yourself when you would stop. Philly, Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City, Detroit, Washington, Cincinnati, San Francisco, the Rams, the Packers, The Vikings, the Chargers, the Texans, the Broncos, Bucks. That's where I would stop. So coincidentally, I would not bet money on the Denver Broncos, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the same odds as Denver to win the Super Bowl. That would be where that Vikings I don't believe in at all with J.J. McCarthy. So leave them out of it. But like that Chargers, Texans, Bucks range 25-1, or the Chargers and the Texans, Bucks are 30-1. Like that would be the area where I would certainly not go any lower than that. But really, I'm looking at 20-1 with Green Bay. That's the longest shot today that I would be, that I'm debating. Again, I haven't done, but that would be probably the most I would go. But like I like LA and Houston and Tampa. But after that, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Arizona, Dallas, Atlanta, Seattle, New England, Miami, no, thank you. I'll say this. If you are willing, maybe you are willing to put an uncomfortable amount of money on the Denver Broncos. Okay, but if you go any lower than that on that list I just mentioned, any lower than the Denver Broncos and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm giving you the hotline. I'm giving you the hotline number. I'm not saying don't put a sawbuck on one of these teams if they're your favorite team or you're like, hey, why not? But like enough money that you would really miss it if you bet, if you're putting that on the Bears, the Steelers, the Cardinals, the Cowboys, the Falcons, the Seahawks, I will give you the hotline because you should not be doing that. In all honesty, you probably shouldn't put an uncomfortable amount of money on any of these teams. You probably shouldn't. That's bordering on problematic. But we know people do. I mean, John Mateer's only putting, what, $50 on the USC UCLA game, allegedly. That's not an uncomfortable amount of money. Maybe for a college student it is pre-NIL. Again, allegedly. I cannot emphasize this enough. We don't know whether John Mateer's Venmo transactions that clearly read sports gambling and even listed the USC UCLA game in the description as well. We don't know that was for sports gambling. He says it was all a big inside joke. Which I totally get because I joke on social media all the time. It's an inside joke I have with my friends that we talk about the drugs we're going to do later. Like, it's just a joke. Inside joke. Haven't heard anything on that, by the way. Any movement on that? How's that coming, Oklahoma? How's that investigation going into the quarterback that's supposed to save Oklahoma football in the SEC this year? I'm sure you're spending 24 hours a day round the clock trying to get to the bottom of this mystery. 719-24-7-1313. We'll hit the three stories that are driving the show after this.